You know, we use them every single day, dozens, maybe even hundreds of times. They're basically the building blocks of curiosity, the little keys that unlock all kinds of information. We are, of course, talking about the words we use to ask questions, but have you ever really stopped to think about how this small but super powerful family of words actually works?
So what are they, really? Why do they seem so weirdly similar, even in totally different languages? And how in the world do they manage to basically flip our sentences upside down just to demand an answer? Well, those are the exact questions we're going to dig into.
I mean, think about it. You probably mastered words like what and where way before you could even tie your own shoes. But underneath that simplicity, there's this incredible system of history, of grammar rules, and all these surprising connections that literally govern how we ask for information. So it's about time we looked under the hood.
All right, so first things first, let's get properly introduced to our subjects. In English, we call them the words, and honestly, it really helps to think of them as a tight-knit little family with one very, very specific job. So here are the main players in the English branch of the family. You've got who, which asks about people. What is all about things. Whose is for possession. Which helps you with choices. Then you have where for place, when for time, and why, well, that one's always looking for a reason. And then there's the odd one out. The cousin who apparently didn't get the memo on the family uniform. How?
Right? It just stands out, doesn't it? It doesn't start with WH, but we always group it in with the rest. So what's the deal? Is it adopted? Just a rebel? Well, the real story is actually buried deep, deep in the history of language.
And here it is, the family secret. Thousands of years ago, every single one of these words came from one single root in a language called Proto-Indo-European quo. This is like the great-great-granddaddy of all our question words. Over centuries, that hard K sound softened into a hwa sound. For most of the words, we just started spelling that sound WH. But for how and who, the pronunciation shifted just a little bit more, and we ended up dropping the W sound. But it's still 100% part of the family.
Now, what's really cool is that this ancient quo root didn't just give us our English which words. Let's hop over and meet some of their long-lost relatives in Spanish.
So in Spanish, that exact same ancestor word went down a totally different path. Instead of becoming hua, it kept that hard K sound, which in Spanish could spelled QU. It's the same family, just, with a different accent.
I mean, just look at this lineup. The family resemblance is undeniable, right? English who is Spanish quién, what is qué. You can practically see the shared DNA. They all trace right back to that same original quo root.
Okay, so we've established that they're all related. But just like any family, they've got some complicated rules about how they all interact. And this is where things get really interesting, especially for language learners, because the grammar is not always what you'd expect. Okay, so here's a huge rule in English, the helper verb. Do, does, or did. Look at the left side. Who speaks English? Here, who is the subject? It's the one doing the speaking, so no helper verb needed. But now look at the right. What do you want? In this sentence, the subject is you. The question word, what, is the object. And when that WH word is the object, you have to call in the helper do to make the question work. And Spanish has its own tricky situations for sure. One of the absolute biggest points of confusion for English speakers is figuring out when to use que and when to use its close cousin, cual. They can both mean what or which, but you absolutely cannot just swap them. So here is the basic rule of thumb. You use que when you're asking for a definition or an explanation, when the field of possible answers is totally wide open. So if you point to some weird machine and ask, ¿Qué es eso?, you're asking for the most basic information. You have no idea what that thing could be.
And now, it's time for the biggest family secret of them all. There's this hidden rule of grammar, this sort of linguistic gravity, that both the English way family and their Spanish ku cousins almost always have to obey. It's a rule so powerful it dictates the entire shape of our questions.
It's called wa movement. And here's an easy way to think about it. The question word isn't just asking something, it's demanding to be the center of attention. And to do that, this rule forces it to jump from wherever it would normally be in a sentence all the way to the very front.
And we could actually see this best when we break the rule. Like sometimes when you're surprised or you need someone to repeat something, you might say it like this. You leave the question word right in its natural spot. Linguists call this WH in situ, which just means in its original place. It sounds really informal, almost like an echo.
But for a normal, standard question, that where movement rule kicks right back in. The word where isn't allowed to stay at the end. It has to move to the front. And that one transformation is really the heart of how we form questions in English and in Spanish and a ton of other languages. It's why questions just feel so different from regular statements.
But hold on, here's the final twist. This rule, this whole we movement thing that feels so completely natural to us, it is not a universal law of language. Not even close. The global family of questions is way more diverse than that.
Take a look at Mandarin Chinese. On the left, in English, we move what to the front. But look at the right. In Mandarin, the word for what, shenmei, it just stays right where the answer would go. The question has the exact same word order as the statement would. There's no movement at all.
And it gets even cooler. Some languages, like Korean, can actually build the question right into the verb itself. So instead of having a separate word for how, they might use what's basically a question verb that combines the idea of being and how into one single powerful word. It's a totally different way of thinking about how to ask for information.
So, after that whole trip through ancient history and deep grammar, what are the most important things to pack in your own language toolkit? Let's do a quick recap.
Okay, number 1. Our W and Q words are all one big family, tracing back to that ancient root, kuo. Number 2. Don't forget that English helper verb rule. If the question word isn't the subject, you're probably going to need a do or a did. 3. That powerful force called which movement is the reason our questions start with words like what and where. And finally, and this is a big one, always remember that this is just our way of doing things. Other languages have their own totally brilliant ways to ask questions.
At the end of the day, it all comes down to this simple idea from the linguists Huddleston and Pullum. The main job of this whole family of words is just to be a flag. It's a signal to the person you're talking to that says, hey, pay attention, I need some information here. They are the universal markers of a question.
From their ancient origins to the really complex rules that control them today, these simple little words are, well, anything but simple. They are the engine of every conversation, the very foundation of discovery. And they prove that sometimes the most profound things in the world can come in the form of a simple question. So I guess the only thing left to think about is, what will you ask next?